It's Eric Backer, the naturopath. New Zealand is where I live at the moment. I love it here. Let's talk about antibiotics and the link between antibiotic prescriptions and obesity. As the title says, it's a scientifically proved now link. There is absolutely a link. There's a link below in the description box you can click and you can have a look at the page. You'll find it quite interesting. It's a pharmacology page. It's actually a proper page. It's not some dodgy kind of page from some backstreet alley made in some weird country. This is a proper page. So you have a look at the links in this, click through it, read like I did. You'll be absolutely gobsmacked to see how many antibiotic prescriptions the average person in the United States receives. By the time they're 20, it's just phenomenal. It's I think 17 prescriptions or 20 prescriptions the average one faces. 4 out of 10 children who visit a medical practitioner's clinic in the United States for a sniffle walk out with an antibiotic. And of course, in those cases, it's not really tested if it's bacterial half the time or viral, so generally a waste of time. Millions and millions of people are given antibiotics needlessly globally for the stupidest small reasons. I can't believe what I still see, and I still see right up until my very last days in practice that a child will present to a doctor with a very small cut on the finger and get put on penicillin for 7 days. To me, that's just absolute ludicrous. If this medical practitioner had any understanding at all of, example, tea tree oil, would understand that a little cut can be washed out, tea tree oil applied to that after proper irrigation, a little band-aid on it, problem sorted. But no, the kid's gut's going to be trashed for 7 days. So it's long, long overdue that we start to completely rethink our take on antibiotics, because they are still used too much. 75% of antibiotics are used in the veterinary trade of all antibiotics made. And we're talking millions of tons per year. We're not talking like a handful. We're talking like container loads of the stuff are used. In children, if we look in the UK, over 50% of children who go to a doctor receive an antibiotic. So clearly a lot of doctors have not understood the message. There's too much prescribing of antibiotics going on. So what's the link between antibiotics and obesity? Well, the link's been clearly established, and many scientists now believe, and these are expert microbiologists, now actually believe that there's a linear progression of the introduction of antibiotics about 80 years ago and obesity. Because we can literally draw the line with antibiotic consumption globally and put a line parallel under it with obesity. So you've got different groups of bacteria in your gut. No different than if I go to LA, you've got the Crips, you've got the Bloods, you've got the Mormons, you've got the Christians, you've got all sorts of belief systems and people that live in a community, just like bacteria do. But, just like any other group, something's going to happen and it's going to, rattle a few groups, and you're going to get a predominance of some standing up causing problems and imbalances. Now, antibiotics, when you pump those into the body, orally particularly, but also intravenously even more so, you're going to really mess up those relationships with all of those camps of people in there. It's a little bit like the Hells Angels come to town, okay? And that's how I see an antibiotic. When a person swallows it for 7 days, it's like all of a sudden a group of bikies descend upon a town and they create mayhem. They just trash the place, okay? And that's what happens. Your gut gets trashed. And unfortunately for some people, the recovery, could be anywhere from a month up to 10 years. Some cases I've been working with now take 10 years, can take years and years to recover, where they've had antibiotics for several years in duration. A patient yesterday told me that his mother got put on antibiotics for 6 months for an autoimmune disease. Well, that's again ludicrous. So how do antibiotics cause obesity? Well, what they've worked out, 2 major groups, the Firmicutes and the Bacteroides, the Crips and the Bloods, for example, okay? When those balances become disturbed, some of the bacteria from the Bacteroides group can actually gobble more calories up from the food you eat. The bacteria can also push buttons and tell you when to eat, how much to eat, when not to eat. Appetite is regulated quite a lot by food intake and by groups of bacteria. It's a carefully controlled situation in your gut. Now, antibiotics mess that whole thing up. They mess all that up. So you'll find that you'll be getting all kinds of issues post-antibiotics, that you shouldn't be getting. So naturally, you need to go on probiotics after. So, but my strong recommendation for you is not to take antibiotics unless it's a life or death situation. And on the page, on the link that I'll share with you in the description box, you'll actually read there that most people don't need to take an antibiotic when they're given one, okay? So the doctor will often give that drug just to shut someone up or get them out of the room, because that's dealt with that problem, okay? But it hasn't dealt with the problem. It's caused a secondary problem. So be very, very cautious about taking antibiotics, particularly if you're told you need them for several months on end. It's ludicrous to do that. You're really, really upsetting the digestive function. And unless you have a really good program in mind to rebuild that gut, that could be a turning point for the rest of your life. I'm working with a patient currently who's been unwell for over 10 years after antibiotics on and off for 3 years. I mean, how stupid is that? 3 years of antibiotics on and off. I mean, that's just about killed this person. Even after 1.5 years of working with this patient, we've only got him back to about 70%. So it is possible to fully recover from antibiotics and to gain your health back, but if you don't start on them in the first place and think carefully what you're doing, there are intravenous therapies now, there are different herbal or nutritional therapies now that have very powerful effects on improving your immune function. Many integrative doctors now can recommend these different therapies for you for different conditions, which in fact will no doubt, in my mind, be better than an antibiotic because they'll have a similar effect, yet without the collateral damage, okay? So if you are a large person watching this, don't despair, because you can still turn your gut around. But if you don't start on that merry-go-round of drugs in the first place, it's going to save you a lot of hassle. Just like if you don't have an Amex card and several credit cards, you get yourself into hot water. And it's the same with antibiotics. One drug leads to another drug, leads to another drug. That's my opinion, and that's my experience too, for what it's worth. Thanks for tuning in. Always appreciate it.